Well, thank you very much. Well, we've just learned from Mr. Bruder how a company for chemicals can land in a cell phone. I can tell you the story of us, how a plant engineer landed on the beaches of this world, or should we say in the bathrooms of this world. I'd like to tell you my story and share that with you, but I emphasize that's my story. That are my subjective experiences. It's not a blueprint for innovation, it's just our personal story. And what you can see behind me is a bit of an overview over the actors and protagonists about whom I'm going to speak. It's the Wagner Group, that's our investor, that's our mothership, so to say. Then we've got the Wagner Freiraum, that's our incubator that we established in particular to do cosmetics. Then we've got IONIQ Skin. That's our company. And if you, of course, want to hook up with me after the event, you can do that using LinkedIn, and we can then be in touch with one another afterwards. So who is Wagner? Who and what is Wagner? Guys that are so crazy to enter into the cosmetics industry. I assume the one or the other of you may know Wagner, but probably most of you have no idea who Wagner is. It is a mechanical engineer from the Lake Constance region. Normally, they of course work and build for the industry, plants for surface coating of car parts, for furniture. We produce equipment for the supply chain of producing companies. That's one unit. The other emphasis of the company is the classic consumer business, which means that Wagner does, for example, DIY products that you can then buy, as I say, in your DIY store in order to have, well, your walls, your furniture at home then coated with paint or varnish. As I said, we're in the region of Lake Constance, not in Berlin or Munich. IONIQ is also domiciled at Lake Constance, which is wonderful in the summer. In the winter, it has the highest suicide rate across Germany. So you can see it is a bit of a polarizing area, that Lake Constance region. But to give you a bit of an insight, what are surfaces and what do they mean for Wagner or for us here? Have a look at this. Our mission is the perfect surface finish. Now, I've given you a few examples what we do. Of course, our CTO will do that in much more detail. I just do it here, shall we say, in a management talk, what that means. Perfect surface. You can see it here, checkered top. You have the best white color you can get, and you've got an application. Means that it's the brush, which means the result is often a bit striped, and you probably noticed from your home work yourself, your DIY work, it's pretty hard to actually get that evenly applied over the surface. If you change the application method with a roller, the result is slightly different, as you see here. Of course, a bit patchy here and there. You need plenty of color to go over that checkered, over that chessboard, and then you can also go for a spray gun. Then it gets a bit better, needs a bit of trying, of course, but you can see the application method has a huge impact on the result. To also give an idea where all of this happens, and I'm pretty safe to say that you at home probably also have a Wagner coated product at home, where we mainly work, because I mean, who of you owns an IKEA piece of furniture? Quite a few, yeah, I can see. So that's exactly where we also work. We are, so to say, in most of your homes already present. If you have a premium car like a Porsche here, that's where we, for example, coat the veneers. The rims are coated by Wagner. So we're a world market leader, shall we say, in the production of equipment that can spray paint your rims. And of course, your billies from IKEA also don't fall from the tree. White varnish, they also are applied by Wagner applications. Then, of course, wind turbines to be extra efficient and to produce extra power are also spray painted with us. And then, the odd year, you have a Formula 1 race company coming round, and that's actually interesting. That's the moment when the whole company suddenly works customer-centric, and everybody, of course, wants to have a visit to the pit of that race company. So that's Wagner, and I think this is the fastest company presentation ever done in history. So what has Wagner got to do with sun lotion, with cosmetics on your bathroom? At first sight, absolutely nothing. But what's the connection is obvious. It's to do with the surface itself. Our engineers can tell you at any time why that piece of wood had water seeping in, because it wasn't properly coated. You see here at the top left. And you can also say at any time why this steel post here corroded, why the anti-corrosion protection simply didn't work on that steel post. That's a connection that can also, well, bring you over to skincare. And I think we realized this ourselves 5 or 6 years ago when it dawned on us very suddenly. There's plenty of people out there who get a sunburn. And I'm sure if we were to do a survey here asking you, have you ever had a sunburn? I mean, almost everyone would have to lift their hand. And that's absolutely unnecessary. There's no need for that, because you have sun lotion. You can use it or not use it, of course. But if you use it, we normally, or often 60% of the people don't manage to still avoid a sunburn from applying sun lotion. So 40% of all people who use sun lotion, who want to protect themselves with sun lotion, don't manage to do it properly. And from the perspective of surface coating specialists, it's a coating problem, because it can't be down to the sun lotion, to the sun cream. And this is an issue which we then really looked at in more detail, because of what you can see at the top right-hand side. That's a person that here obviously applied sun lotion, otherwise he wouldn't have had this freckled sunburn. And of course, this is not just an issue with huge market volume, it has also health implications. The picture below, the middle one, you can see that's a person whose one side only is, as you can see here, well, very much affected by UV light. That's a truck driver, somebody who's driven his whole life in trucks. On the one side, of course, was exposed to the ultraviolet light from the window, and the other one to the cabin. So there was a constant UV exposure, and that's the result. That's the result of these wrinkles of 30, 40 years driving a truck. So as you can see here, that is, shall we say, sunscreen is an anti-aging problem as such. If you want to give your wife an anti-aging tool, just give her sun cream. Use that every day. That's the best protection against aging. Anti-aging or the aged skin is not the only problem. I mean, I'd say it's actually not just a vanity problem, but 98% of all skin cancer diagnoses are down to the fact that the ultraviolet exposure was too high. And these figures are climbing as we speak, although they would be avoidable. So what was it, 2013, we decided to make a contribution towards the health system so that sun cream at the end of the day can be applied much better, and people are much better protected against ultraviolet exposure. Now, easier said than done. We are still, of course, coming from a mechanical engineering, plant engineering environment, and just the two guys of us and say, hey, now we want to do the perfect sunscreen application. It's everything easy but to do. But we were walking around Lake Constance Promenade, or went to events and used a UV camera, and I think the principle is something that most of you should be familiar with. We know that it here, as you see here, is if it blocks UV light here, or they are then depicted in black. So this is not shoe varnish. No, this is the test to protect yourself against skin. So what you can see here is that boy on the right-hand side. I'm sure he tried, or he was adequately actually coated by his parents as good as it worked. But you can see there's still sections in his face that are not covered by that sun lotion above his eye or around his eye. Or the guy on the left, the young person at the beach volleyball tournament. He managed to apply the sunscreen at the top and at the bottom. But at the same time, you've noticed sunscreen can be found everywhere here on a secret pack or on your latte macchiato. So that was our hands-on proof that somehow people don't manage to apply sun cream evenly. And so that was our start for our R&D work. We started interviews with dermatologists, we did consult experts, customers and the likes, and really went to an extensive R&D and survey phase. And this chart now here took almost a full year, and as unspectacular as it may look, it is actually finding a good reception here amongst the clients, because there is 3 central reasons why you don't manage, or 4 actually, to apply your sun cream properly. The one is the rubbing in effect, meaning as soon as you use your hand to apply sun lotion, you partly already damage the protective layer, the film, the protective film, and by no means do you manage to get it over and applied evenly. So this spotty, this freckled application is done simply by your manual tool or by your manual application. Then the consistency of the sunscreen. If you only look at the plastics, they're sometimes too thick and you don't get the metering, the dosage right. The third one, that's a key factor, you can't reach all your body parts. Have you ever tried to put sun cream on your back? Difficult, you need somebody else to help you, and if you don't find anybody, you're pre-programmed to get a sunburn on your back. And last but not least is the frequency. There's people that cream or use sun cream at the beginning of the month and think that's enough for the whole month. That's obviously not the case. It's inadequate. Every 2 hours, that's the rule of thumb that you have to apply. That is sensible for protect yourself against sun. So these are all problems next to a host of others that people get a sunburn. And of course, they even mean that people don't even use sun cream anymore, especially that thick viscose sun cream. Nobody likes that because it's sticky. That's the reason number one why people don't like to use suntan lotion. And of course, that has these fatal consequences that we just saw. Now, if you take this and look and apply this to our spraying technology, you can see these are problems that can be solved, that can be avoided. As I said before, think of rim spray painting. Now, rim is very complex with lots of little angles, nuts and crannies, and it's everything but easy to coat this evenly. And you want to coat it very evenly because, of course, I mean, strangely coated rim is something nobody will buy, nobody will want to have. And of course, you shouldn't do that with hand either. I mean, do you want to have your car, if you want to buy a car, do you want to have that hand coated? No, nobody likes that and nobody does that anymore. But seemingly, we think for our skin that's perfectly adequate. And that's of course the most important surface that we have, that we own. Our skin. And so, on that basis, we started with our development. And Wagner, the Wagner R&D department started out and looked at, well, what can we do and what do we have in our technology basket with which we can solve these very problems of application of suntan lotion. And 2 years later, 2 delayed launches and many million euros later, we finally came up. Oh, we've been to the market now for what is it, just 2 months, and we developed IONIQ, IONIQ 1. That's the sprayer that you see here. What is so special about this IONIQ 1 sprayer? Well, it's a sprayer that is basically coming from the rim spray application. And that's been miniaturized to, well, handbag size. What can it do, that sprayer? Just imagine you will want to spray away from a body and the droplets turn around and land again on your surface because your skin is so attractive. It's got such a pull. Would you believe that? Good, good. There's only one here that believes me that this is how it works. No. Look, but this is actually what it can. I mean, that's the marketing story of this sprayer. Because what we did is, we developed a sprayer that is based on the technology of electrohydraulic traction, which means we use a liquid, we statically charge it negatively, and your skin has a natural, well, pull. It's negative or positively charged, wherever. Probably you as a physicist can give us the exact calculation here. And simply given that you've got the various trigger buttons that you press, then you have nothing else but a closed loop between the body and the sprayer. And with that, you've got this pull between the cosmetic, the suntan, and the skin. That's then evenly applied to the skin. And this means I just go over my back, over the top of my back, and the droplets will then, in the curvature, distribute nice and evenly on the back. Yeah, on my back, on the arms, and wherever I've got exposed skin, and you no longer need the hand to, so to say, rub it in afterwards. It can all be done very simply, and you can actually have your whole body sprayed within 1 minute. There's a huge convenience advantage over any other suntan lotion out there in the market, but it makes suntan usage all the more safer. Now, we can do a lot more than just spray sun cream. We noticed, of course, this technology can be used for many things. It's pretty expensive, but at the same time, suntan has a very functional benefit. And so we decided, well, why don't we just go and apply this for the entire skincare? So with IONIQ, you can't just use suntan lotion, but for example, mosquito repellent. It's no fun to bite into a sandwich if, of course, you've sprayed yourself with mosquito repellent prior because it doesn't taste nice. Or here, self-tanning lotion. Don't know whether that's a big issue for you, but of course we know there's a big target group out there that likes to use self-tanning lotion. And here, I mean, there's a market for this, and everybody wants to have that evenly applied. It must smell well, and it must be easy to apply. So that's a problem we can also solve. And, I mean, you can name any cosmetic application, we can spray them all. We just started with self-tanning, mosquito, and sun, and body lotion. That's the 4 that we started with in order to simply develop a certain bandwidth in the market. Now, what we also developed, concurrent, and that has a little more to do with frequency that I mentioned earlier. How can we train people? How can we train people that they actually use that at the right frequency and, so to say, do and apply their skincare adequately. Well, we can also mine the data if the customer wants us. That means, while a Bayersdorf L'Oreal would have to say to somebody who goes purchasing their goods at a drugstore, then if you know how many of these goods you've sold in Hamburg in June, we know exactly how often, when, and where they've applied this with the sprayer, because that's a data record. There's no cosmetic company that has that data record available. And here we can tell our customers, look, you've already spent 1.5 hours in the sun, because we know you're in Brazil, and it's time for you to reapply suntan, because you may be too, well, your skin type is too bright for the sun exposure that you have. So the individualization of skincare is a huge issue for us. We think we are a lot more than just a spraying device provider. But I'd like to give you a little, well, proof video here. I'd like to show you that you can really believe me, that I'm not telling you nonsense. Let's see whether we can roll that clip. Can we get that clip rolling? Here we are.
Hier ein Vergleich, handelsübliches Aerosol, Sonnenspray. Hier sehen Sie die Dunstwolke, die normalerweise beim Einsprühen mit
So what you can see here is the classic cloud cover, and this is an ultra close-up view of the motion. You can see how the droplets, so to say here, as they see it on the right-hand side, go all around the skin and hand. And although I'm just spraying at the front, you can see that these drops have this wraparound effect. It's a wraparound effect of 180 degrees. So that means you just spray here on the top of the hand, of the arm, and underneath you will find the tan lotion equally applied. And that means we have the possibility to really spray your entire body evenly with that new sprayer. So much on our product and on our innovation. I wouldn't say it's an innovation yet, I'll come back to that in a second, but to what we do. In the next part of my presentation, I'd like to address the question, how did we do this? How did we go about this? Because I said the journey from this mid-sized company and to the plant engineer to this product has been an interesting one and also a taxing one. Everything but easy, that journey. And therefore, I have a few learnings that I'd like to share with you, all to do with our innovation culture. First of all, let's clarify what playing field we're working on. Innovation is, of course, something we all use, and disruptive is even more inflationary at the moment. And this is basically my definition of innovation. True innovation, as it says in the middle. For me, innovation is nothing else but a cycle. I've got a good idea, which is not enough. That idea needs to be implemented, and it needs to be implementable. A good business model, and at the end of it, it also needs to be used, so it has to be successful, otherwise it's no purpose, it's no fun. So, that is how we understand innovation, and that's why I also said we are not yet an innovation as such, because we still have to prove it with our success, and we've just been to the market for the last 2 months, so that's too short a time to be successful or to declare yourself to be a success. Now, that's our business launch trip and milestone. We came up with the idea in 2017, as you can see here, and at the time we started here, well, from humble beginnings, mid-sized company, and we said, okay, we're going to produce a sprayer, we're going to be a hardware provider for an OEM, for a Bayersdorf, or L'Oreal, you name them, for any of these big chemical OEMs. That's how we started. We had a cooperation with colleagues from a big skincare company from France. We had a cooperation with a very big partner from northern Germany. And the problem with both these corporations was that they were all interested and all thought it's a great idea, but whenever we provided the latest prototype, we simply didn't get any suntan lotion. Because we, as that small company, we were not prioritized with these huge corporations. So that meant we were proactively terminating these partnerships. We simply could not see any advances, because without the sunscreen, we cannot develop a sunscreen sprayer. I mean, these are two things that are contingent upon one another. And so, in the next step, we said, okay, can't be so difficult to find a sunscreen brand, or let's build our own, make our own sunscreen, which we managed. And of course, we got the expertise on board. We bought that from the company and also collaborated with institutes and with other experts, with other job order producers. And I mean, nobody comes to Lake Constance for this, but this is done with partners. And within 6 weeks, we had a sprayable sunscreen. That was, of course, refined over the last years. And now we're actually winning tests against the market leaders, which means you can even produce a new sunscreen. Next, in the next step, we check this against the market, which means our sunscreen with our sprayer, and well, we found nobody wanted to buy it, because sunscreen is too functional, and nobody is willing, and that was the price point at issue, with 100 euros, nobody was willing to spend 100 euros for a combination of sunscreen and sunscreen sprayer, which meant we tried to add value into the application. And we said, okay, look, spraying is not enough by itself. That's our core competence, that's true, but we have to develop further. We need to develop into a fully fledged cosmetic company. And so we developed a whole range of cosmetic articles, also expanded our digital exposure, simply to create extra added value for the customer. And suddenly, our market research values really shot up. Sorry to say, also the price of the products went up. And that wasn't really planned. We hadn't planned for that yet, but all the same, we find we now have a much better balance, and the market launch and market starter showed us that we're not here barking up the wrong tree, but it actually went pretty well, that market launch. Despite the, well, you all know the conditions, COVID, Brexit for us, because UK is a market for us, a big market for us, so that was everything but easy. And of course, also higher prices for electronic goods is something that you also know had made it everything but easy for us. So that's been our corporate journey to date. Now, the milestone of this journey is not just described by one organization model. We call ourselves a corporate startup. Initially, we thought we were the very first one. By no means. There were plenty of publications already in the 90s about corporate startups. So we started as a two-man company. The two founders, my colleague and myself, the two of us, we were the department that looked at, well, sunscreen. And then, well, we established an incubator to really, so to say, step outside from Wagner and to do whatever we wanted. We left Wagner, we outsourced ourselves, also to take up speed in our developments. And at some point, the whole issue became so big and so real that we established a subsidiary, a 100% subsidiary. Sorry to say, not as we heard from colleague Bruder, that we simply had 50 million euros at our disposal and all the freedom. No, we got some millions, but not any freedom to develop, which meant we were partly integrated. We were using resources like R&D, IT, HR, all kind of issues that you need, but that are not market specific, but we, of course, could use synergy effects, and we could also use the expertise of that other company. But the market work, that's something, the marketing, that's what we did, and that's the IONIQ Skincare Ltd. That is the market-based company that we established. Then, of course, at the time, we were confronted with the challenge, are we going to Berlin, to Munich, or wherever, or another metropolitan area, or are we going to stay here at Lake Constance? Are we going to get people from outside or inside the company? How are we going to start up our company? We had no idea, and we still are learning day by day, and probably we've done plenty of mistakes along the way, but nonetheless, we still believe we've now found a setup that can be, well, that can be handled, and that is working. Here's the 5 points. You see them there. Staffing is one important issue, meaning we've got one Wagner employee who's been a member of the Wagner Group for 10 years. Then my colleague Valentin, the co-founder, and he's the interface to the mothership. And everything else here was recruited externally. Expert knowledge from the outside, fresh perspectives coming in from the outside, all of which was of great help for us. And now, well, we're of course not just developing cosmetic products, but we're also really pushing, we're shifting this, shall we say, huge ship of Wagner slightly further to the right. So it's also being retransformed and transformed together with us when it comes to digitalization. And this whole knowledge also was of benefit to the bigger company. Then, visibility, of course, is an important aspect for us, very important for us. Was it the right decision not to go to Berlin or to somebody else, but to stay here within Wagner? Well, because of course, on our R&D R&D development team of the spray, we had so many setbacks that probably every other company would have said, okay, we're going to pull the plug, this is enough, you've cost us, you've burned so much cash for us. But no, we were always able to pull up the next success and like picked up the next prize, Digital X, and the likes. And only recently we won the award for what is the best employer amongst startups, the business punks. So we call these proxy successes. That's something that we always pulled up our sleeves, and that meant the financing was going. Whenever we had a glitch or a hitch, as I said, 2 launches postponed. That's millions of investments. And Wagner, I mean, it's a company with half a billion euros in turnover. If they invest 10, 15 million in a company like ours, that is a lot of money for them. That's a lot of money for them compared to what Wagner actually stands for and what Wagner is. So the EV factor is similar. I mean, the interfaces need to have the right people on board, I mean, to pick up speed. Like my colleague Valentin, I mean, for 10 years he's had business relations to the managers of Wagner, to the corporate managers of Wagner, and could therefore take up the speed that we need, that we normally need, and that's not so easily found in the classic R&D department. Then intrapreneurship, that's another central component, and that means a lot, and I think you could give your own presentation on intrapreneurship, but all in all, here the matter is of keeping entrepreneurs within the company and to enable them to have processes and procedures adjusted to the needs, and not just to accept what's a given, the status quo. Meaning, we adopted, that's working, but we also shelved and disinvested from things that didn't work, like project management, an important aspect. Product development was with Wagner, or still is with Wagner, but we also, of course, took over their project management, but with a product where there's no predecessor, where there's no data yet available, with technology that nobody has ever yet researched in this environment, you find it difficult with a status quo development, because it's hard to define the milestones. So, here, we really switched for what I would call a hybrid, a very agile model. Or, as I said earlier in a personal consultation, we're SAP tied. And, of course, this was also something that was to help us in our e-commerce infrastructure. And I had to learn and had to hand in my termination simply to avoid that, because it would have been an absolute disadvantage in our competitive field. And I don't want to work for a company that at the end of the day takes 4 years in order to upload a new picture in their web shop. So, I mean, these were issues where you have to, well, you take up personal risks in order to effect change. And last but not least, the network, equally essential, of course. I don't know everything, my colleague doesn't know everything, we're not all knowledgeable. I mean, many of these issues are completely new for us as well. And we simply need fresh, new expertise from the outside in many, many different areas. And over the last few years, we really set up and built up this huge network to get authentic knowledge, authentic expertise, and to learn ourselves from them. And that is of huge help. And it's much better than having a whole team of consultants on board, because we now know who we have to approach if we've got a problem. And that was something that really was a huge lift for us, especially in the product development, and also in working with the colleagues from BASF who helped us with the UV filter selection. So, how does all of this work? So there's 2 perspectives, I think, and you have to put perspective into perspective here. You've got the perspective of the executives or the investor, in our case it's Wagner, and of course you've got the corporate startup world. Now these 2 need to harmonize. You need to have an executive level, a leadership that is willing to take a risk, that has courage to develop something new and go into the entrepreneurial risk, but at the same time, there's an organization that needs people in the company, working in the company, people willing to take a decision, although it might curtail or even risk their own career, because there's an inherent risk in all of this. Maybe because you're convinced of the cause, but if it goes wrong, you might be out of a job. So that's people that we're looking for. Hard to find, I can tell you, not so easy, but I mean, it's an essential component. And I mean, I think I benefit from both perspective, and it's like a, shall we say, I'd like to give you an overview of what tools you need to work with these 2 perspectives. What we call the CXO, doesn't matter whether it's CTO, CEO, whatever, COO, the CXO. It's a mixer. I mean, he's sitting at this mixing table, and he's got a tool kit available that he can apply for culture, for innovation, for process, for structure within the company. And one important aspect, oh, sorry, I leapt over one, is the assumption of risk. willing to take on risks, to invest in an uncertainty, but also to stand the back up and say, okay, if this is not going to go right, I'm still going to stay behind you, and I'm not going to give up after the first failure and say, okay, I'm going to disinvest. That's far too risky for me. I mean, otherwise we would have been off the cards, off the table after the first year, if we hadn't had this risk willingness from Wagner after the first launch. Very important for innovation. And the less known development, the more risky, of course, it is, and the higher the bet. And I think we heard this earlier in the presentation. What was it, did you say? Only 1 of 100 such startups will be successful. This is how you have to look at this. You invest amount X, and it is nothing else but a bet. But some of these bets don't work. And sometimes you stand a better chance, and sometimes, well, sorry, a lot of it fails. But far too many startups, a lot of corporate startups, other startups, are instantly gauged against the KPIs of traditional cooperation, meaning, hey, what's the return on investment and the likes? You can't do that. Or when are you running into profitability and the likes? That's not going to work. Of course, I can present you with a business case, a business plan that says after 5 years, oh, we're going to have 1 billion in turnover. And I can even argue for that. But at the end of the day, it might not happen either. So that means an investor, needs to be willing to risk on that bet. Structure, the structural approach, the structural diagram. Not everything will work right from start. It needs time. It takes time to build up an organization, to build up structures. And, well, the leadership must be able to have that time available. And, well, in our case, that held true or was essential. Incubating new business fields, developing new business fields was part of the subordinate corporate strategy of Wagner. So we could always rely on this. We always knew what we're doing is a part of the bigger Wagner group. And of course, helped us also to, well, argue the case for certain expenditures that we had to make. And then, which brings me to my penultimate slide. And here, well, that's the internal perspective, how we built up our team. The CXO, of course, is somebody we can only influence partly. He's there, he's got a certain mindset or not, while the team itself, the corporate startup, is something that we can, of course, influence much more directly. And that means, as you see, we've got 3, shall we say, guiding principles that help us and were extremely important in how we set up a team. They may be unusual, also for established companies, but you see them here. The one is transparency. And I mean that is very honest, straightforward transparency. A full transparency with the entire team and also towards the partners. Because we notice time and again, if we're open, or we're even open to a competitor or to somebody who's also working in the same market segment, then we find the same transparency returned to us, and that's of great help for us. Helps greatly in actually implementing what we plan to do. Transparency with the team can be hard to realize because there's many people are afraid, they don't want to make a mistake, they don't want to admit that they've made a mistake on the likes, or in the best case, well, for an excuse. Here, of course, you need to have the safety security that transparency is going to be a payoff. But only if we can be open and honest with the mistakes we make and can only then develop further, because no one of us, well, was born with a silver spoon. Efficiency, that's another central issue, of course, because we have many more tasks and we've got people available. So the time we have, the resources we have need to be handled and dealt with very wisely. And that's why we keep casting people out, throwing them out from meetings if they don't have anything to say or if it's irrelevant for them. I mean, this meeting culture, this superfluous meeting culture is something we try to avoid and rather be more targeted and say, look, can we get X and Y on board of this meeting and get X and Y out of the meeting? Thirdly, that's the escalation strategy. Now, this has a very negative touch, the word and term escalation, but means nothing else. If I don't know what comes next, what to do next, just escalate it to the next level. And not just in 5 years' time, but when it's actually pressing. And my SAP issue was just that. I was at an end with my wits. I talked to all the partners involved, and well, I had to go to the Wagner business management and tell them, look, I have to terminate my contract because I'm not getting anywhere here with this. Wagner, well, accepted this approach, thank God, and well, or if I'm at dead end, that can of course be a disadvantage for the entire organization. So escalation for me is more like a positive aspect to rather take something and escalate it to the next level and then talk with the colleagues and find a solution together with them. To wrap it up, to wrap my presentation with the learnings that are, well, from the 4 years of corporate startup with, as you see here, pain, blood and tears. What are the lessons that I've learned? I think the most important one, for me at least, is give every idea 2 minutes of your time, or if it's just 1 minute, give it time. I found out far too often in the start, when we were a start up, and if the time we were a nobody, not known to anyone, we tried, for example, to get in touch with L'Oreal. We talked with everybody who had innovation in their claim, and at 59 mails, we never received an answer. So, that is an absolute no-go to me. So anybody who approaches me, anybody who has an idea on this project, give them 2 minutes. All you can do, you can only learn, and I think we all have 2 minutes of our daily time available. Can be of great help. Then, secondly, ask your peers. If you've got problems, speak to people that you know. Ask for recommendations. Try to use your network. It is partly much better than to get unknown experts and consultants aboard. I mean, many of the consultants that we consulted, we found were a complete failure for us. Because why should a consultant know if nobody in the market knows how to do this? Then, yes, indeed, speed becomes more and more important. That is an essential driver. And we also often find, I call it the 80-20 split. Do a quick prototype, have a quick proof, and then change it later. I mean, you don't have to put it to the market straight away, but get quick successes going. Very important also here, innovation or disruptive innovation. It's not an absolute must. I mean, today you think everybody has to be disruptive and innovative at the same time. No, I think you can also further develop a product, you can enhance a product. There's great products out there and you don't have to invent the world anew every time. No, here we tried it, of course, but as I said, it's been a very cumbersome journey. Know your strengths. Next item. Of course, we can't know everything, we can't do everything, but learn your strength, know your strengths and weaknesses. And last but not least, I'm not going to talk you through the entire list here. I mean, I can send you the slides later and subsequently if you want. Look, it is really great fun to work in a corporate startup. You learn a new day in, day out. I mean, you go to work in the morning, you don't really know what this day will bring, how you will go out of the day, because there's so much coming your way, so many new issues. But this is what I said at the start. Look, choose your organizational structure wisely. Not every project, not every idea is, well, necessary to be cast in this kind of vessel or form. You have to double check, is that an organizational form that's an advantage for you? Can it also help the organization to develop further? If you negate this, if you say, no, then go for a project organization, a departmental organization, a complete outsourcing organization. There's so many possibilities there, and this is just one. Well, that's it. Thank you.